Hello and welcome. My name is Allie Piper with FS Grain. Thank you for joining us as we kick off our year-end video series. In our first segment, we will explore recent shifts in policy and how the upcoming administration change might affect our grain farmers. I have Chuck Spencer with me today. Chuck is the Executive Director of Government Affairs with Growmark and works in this sector every day. We will cover some of the most pressing questions for today's farming community. Let's get started. Hi, Chuck. Thanks for joining me.
Allie, it's great to be here.
Are there any key policy changes expected with the new administration that could directly affect our grain farmers?
Everyone is talking about the election and then when we have an administration change, what that's going to mean for farmers, for agriculture, and for the economy overall. I think it's important when we look at agriculture to think about farm bill, regulation reform, tax reform, and then DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency. And briefly, I'm going to mention each one of those because the Farm Bill has been extended, will be extended for 1 year. Republicans have total control, House, Senate, and the administration, White House, for at least 2 years. What's going to be important for us is to be engaged with that process and make sure that we get a farm bill that addresses what farmers want in concerns. A lot of talk about disaster funding and relief, but there's also talk about making sure we update that. Regulatory reform. Costs accumulate in every farm field because farmers are end users. We've got to make sure we see regulation reforms that are more transparent, more effective cost-wise, and if we can reform them, roll back some of the costs that came down our way. Tax reform, very interested to everyone because personal income tax rates are only good until December 31st, 2025, and most importantly for the co-op system, it would be the Section 199A, which limited liability entities as well as S corporations, which many farms are organized under, but cooperatives use 199A subsection G pass patronage through. And then will the Department of Government Efficiency mean cuts to agriculture? We're going to find out, and it's going to be important for us to stay engaged.
Yeah. How might the incoming administration approach funding or expanding ag support programs like subsidies, crop insurance, or disaster relief in response to economic pressure on farmers?
I think we're going to see the congressional leaders, and especially the agriculture members, driving both disaster relief. You know, we've had hurricanes this past summer where we've got economic challenges on the farm in specific sectors across this country. And I know looking forward, there's a lot of Midwestern area and region farmers that are thinking about their future returns in 25 and 6. So there could be some disaster relief that's embedded in any type of farm bill extension. That would take place by December 20th because the federal government funding runs out December 20th, and there's no stomach for having the government shut down. And then we're going to have to get into the discussion of the farm bill and debate, and that's where we'll see crop insurance, I think, take a front and center role and be firmly supported.
How might changes in trade policy or tariffs under the new administration affect grain farmers, particularly those who rely on international markets like soybeans?
I know, not only soybeans, as you mentioned, which is always a focus first, and it's fair that you do that, Allie. The other components, though, of just agricultural finished products and what we do, we got to remember, we've seen President Trump in 2016 get elected and implement tariffs. We've also heard him say a lot of things, and that's the beauty, I guess you could say, of a candidate who does say most everything. What we have seen is that him making an announcement of imposing tariffs on Canada and Mexico has brought them to the table very quickly. And in fact, the president of Mexico has engaged in conversation with the incoming President Trump, and of course, the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, flew down to Florida. What this means is we're going to see negotiations go on. What we'll see in final tariffs, we're going to have to wait and find out. What does it mean for China? Will it impact our exports? Could we see farm programs actually take more of a share of the cost structure that in tariffs may bring to a supply chain? And then could we see regulatory reform and revisions in that help reduce the costs at the farm field? We could also request a very aggressive approach when it comes to exploring new trade agreements.
What long-term policy shifts do you see coming?
Long term and 4 years at a time for a president and 2 years for the House of Representatives, with the Senate potentially changing hands every 2 years as well, because only a third of the Senate is elected every 2 years. And I think what we see long term is I do think that this presidential candidate was very firm in his campaign for tax reform and extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 and 2018 permanently. We as individuals like to see our tax rates stay the same. Inflation put a pinch on all of us. You think of farm equipment, you think of commodity prices going down and our costs going up. That's a challenge. We do not need an income tax increase. And we do need to make sure that Section 199, subsection G, goes forward. So the Section 199A, G needs to move forward for cooperatives. A is important for, as I mentioned, S corps. And I think long term, if that's permanently extended, that will be helpful. But we also have to remember what long term means. And in terms of agriculture, we have centennial farms. We have farms that are 200 years old now. And when it comes to political administrations, long term may mean 4 years.
Right. Yeah, I can appreciate that. I have one final question for you. What can farmers do to stay informed and ensure their interests are represented during this transition period?
Oh, this is the most important question you've asked, because having engagement at the local level is very important. Yes, we see news from Washington, D.C. all the time. We see it from the state capitol in Springfield. But everyone has an elected official they live in a district. The question I have for you, have you went in and offered to be on their agriculture committee? Have you met the district staff? The district staff are the entree into the member themselves. Have you scheduled an appointment just to sit down, even spending 5 minutes, introducing yourself, who you work with, how you do business with the agricultural cooperative like Grainco, offering a tour, working with Grainco executives and leaders from the standpoint of offering tours of facilities. And I know they've hosted them before in the past. And that is how great relationships are developed. And the priorities you and I have discussed today gets transmitted directly to the elected leaders and decision makers. So we have a role to play, and it is voting, it's showing up, telling our story, and making sure we're known by our elected leaders.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're very right. Well, thank you for joining us here today and sharing your expertise, Chuck. I hope our viewers can glean some good information from this. And this is just the first of 5 videos that we plan to release here at the end of the year. So thank you for joining, and to our viewers, thank you for watching.
Thank you.